You're listening to the Downeast Mike podcast, the quirky little podcast from Maine. And now, your host, Downeast Mike.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. This is Downeast Mike of the semi-world famous Downeast Mike podcast, coming to you live from Downeast, Maine. It's spring in Maine. We had 3 inches of snow the other day, came popping in here, and more snow coming this weekend. But it's still spring, and I did notice where the snow had melted that the grass is getting greener, and underneath that they call it the poor man's fertilizer. Before we get going today, we're going to go get our sage candle. I'll be right back. Hold on a second. Don't you go anywhere. Just watch the background for a minute. Okay, I'm back with you. I wasn't gone all that long. I hope you didn't lose interest. I've only got a few seconds to keep your interest in this podcast. I know that. You've got other choices. You can go watch dancing people, and we've got some matches. And we're rapidly approaching the place where we can't even have a match in your house. I hope they don't regulate that next. These are strike anywhere matches. If my skin was a little bit rougher, I could, rip the match on my skin. And let's get our sage candle going. And I don't know if you're religious or not. We're going to bless the podcast. It's important to bless the podcast. Make sure it's a good one. All right. We'll put the match. We'll put it right inside the Downeast Mike mug, which is empty today. Here's our sage candle. Burning a little bit thick, isn't it? This is episode 119. That's pretty long, isn't it? 119 episodes. I'm losing viewers by the second, but we're gonna press through. That's what we got to do. Our motto here: some of this is whimsy, some of it's true, and the interpretation of it all is entirely up to you. Today's episode, we have Let's Can The Electoral College, and you're supposed to guess the year on that story or stories. Heavy snow expected this weekend. That's a story from 1977. The Skowhegan Cheater. There's a cheater in Skowhegan. And there was a wolf attack in Maine from 1800. Those are our stories. We like wolf stories. They're not that hard to find in Maine. Friday, March 22nd. We said that, didn't we? It's 2024. We have let's start with a word of the day. Loquacious. I'm probably saying that long. Loquacious. And it means full of excessive talk or wordy, given to fluent or excessive talk. Loquaciously. Loquaciousness. And I think around the office, if you're going back to the office, you probably have somebody that's like that they're loquacious, and maybe it means something like talking too much on location. It's undeniably has a certain poetic ring. It's been a favorite of the writerly sort since it made its first appearance in English in the 17th century, and with poetic license, writers stretched its meaning beyond talkative, and especially excessively talkative, to describe such things as the chattering of birds and the babbling of brooks. The ultimate source of all this chattiness is loqui, a Latin verb meaning to talk and speak. Other words descended from loqui include colloquial, eloquent, and ventriloquism. Throw in your voice over in the corner. Loquacious. First used in, what do they say, 1645 or something like that. So my loquacious friends, they're with you all the time, I think, talking too much. Okay, guess the year of this story. Just try to guess. The Carter administration, now we gave it away. The Carter administration asked Congress today to allow voters to register on Election Day and to pass a constitutional amendment which would provide direct popular election of the president and the vice president. So they wanted to change that. The proposal to junk the embattled Electoral College method of electing presidents and vice presidents, that was part of the comprehensive election law. There was a revision plan prepared by Walter Mondale, who disclosed it at a news conference today, and that was in 1977. They were proposing to do away with the Electoral College. Well, it just so happens in today's news, 17 states have already passed a so-called national popular vote law, and in Augusta, Maine, state lawmakers are holding a public hearing for LD 1578, a bill that would change the way Maine votes in the presidential election. The legislation is known as the National Popular Vote Bill. It's already been passed in 17 states, including Massachusetts and Vermont. Talk about feeling surrounded. Right now, Maine casts all 4 of its electoral votes based on who wins in each of Maine's 2 congressional districts. The winner of each district receives 1 vote, and whoever gets the statewide majority of the vote receives 2 votes. So if CD1 and CD2 vote for 2 different candidates, one candidate will receive 1 electoral vote, and the other will receive 3. What they want to do is enact this LD 1578, and then all 4 electors would instead cast their votes for whoever wins the majority of the vote nationally. 1977 to today, and they're doing the same stuff, same foolishness. Here's a story from 1977. The weatherman's predicting heavy snow. Heavy snow warnings might seem a bit incongruous with bright skies and sunshine, but the National Weather Bureau has warned folks in western and southwestern Maine to prepare for another bout with winter. In the text of a special weather statement, the National Weather Bureau only issues special weather statements when there is special weather kicking around or when automobile dealers want to advertise. No, that's it. According to the text of this statement, a low-pressure system lurking in Pennsylvania will attack Long Island this evening, be sneaking up Cape Cod by early tonight, and after that, the dizzy little storm, swelled by its success, will make its way quickly up the coast, pouncing on a rather unsuspecting Boston, and then setting its way decisively for the Rangeley Mountains with Portland and Lewiston in its path. No storm has ever been this emotional, apparently. On the way, our friend will dump 2 to 3 feet of snow in Vermont. Only half that much, even less, will make its way to the Andy Valley. But check the snow tires anyway and expect 6 to 12 inches. Plan is to stay off the roads and stay away from the coast, blah, blah. That was in 1977. Big spring snowstorm on the way. I think we need to go back further, though, today. Let's go back to 1930. And on this day in 1930, we like this story. This is a nice one. We could get the guy to stop moving the mouse around on us. Kind of nice to be here in front of the microphone again. It's been like a week. Oh, dear. Loquacious. Hard-surfaced Maine roads are passable is the story. This is from 1930. Condition of Maine thoroughfares as given to the Augusta correspondent of the Associated Press by the State Highway Commission show that all trunk lines of hard-surfaced roads in the state are open and passable, although the majority are rough. Dirt roads are rutted and in some places impassable. They give the conditions of the roads up through the state. In Route 1, they're talking about from Kittery through York, good. York to Wells is fair. Wells to, can't read that. Wells to Dunstan? Can't read it. Well, we'll say Wells to Portland. Rough sections, and in South Portland, the rest of it's good. Portland to Cumberland's good. And they go on and on there. So you're driving up Route 1, you could have this little chart here from the Highway Commission. Thomaston to Rockport's good. If you went from Bangor to the Holden line, it gets fair, and Ellsworth to Goldsboro's fair, and then it's rough from Steuben to Millbridge. They actually had the road conditions unimproved and rutted up in Columbia Falls to Jonesboro. I just picture like the real hard tires and bouncing down those roads. Some of these roads they're talking about rough and rutted. Smithfield to Norwich Walk on Route 136, badly rutted. Some of them even says, like Weston to Holton, snow and ice, but passable. 1930, given the road conditions like that. Right next to it, we had an Oldsmobile advertisement. Its Oldsmobile offers important improvements resulting in smarter style, greater luxury, and increased motoring satisfaction without one change in the fundamentals which made this car so popular. Refinements include longer, lower bodies, like me, roomier interiors, deeper seats. You know those seats in those old cars, and you'd sit in them and they had springs in them. You'd sink right down. Fully enclosed four-wheel brakes. All are definite additions to the Oldsmobile value. $895, and that was at Oldsmobile in Lewiston, Maine. Lewiston Oldsmobile. F.E. Frost was the agent. And if you wanted to call him, he's on Middle Street. If you wanted to call him, the number was 4008. Weren't a lot of phones in use at that time, apparently. We're going to go back further now to 1892, and it's a story about a new side-wheeler, the steamer Frank Jones, to be launched in Bath on Saturday. March 22nd was the day of the story. One of these events for which Bath is famous will occur next Saturday when the elegant steamer Frank Jones will be launched. She's built by the New England Shipbuilding Company, now on the stocks, receiving the finishing touches preparatory to launching. She's a side-wheeler. 250 feet long, 36 feet wide. They go on about the size of it. 140 staterooms. And the finishing, both interior and exterior, is first class in every respect. Time to turn our candle a little bit because we need to see that flame. There we go. Going on about this side wheel. She'll be equipped with an electric lighting system. The propelling system will be different than that of other side wheel steamers seen in Maine waters. There is no walking beam or towering paddle boxes, but the paddle wheels are comparatively small, this being possible by reason of a new kind of bucket which is employed. More pull on the water being obtained than the old variety of buckets. The engine is made at Bath Iron Works, is a compound inclined engine of a pattern adopted for the wheels described above. It's expected that the boat will be completed, ready for work in June, and when she'll be placed on the route from Machias to Rockland, connecting at the latter point with the trains over Knox and Lincoln. What great plans they had in place at that time. Related story here. A night Pullman train is to be run, and Bar Harbor passengers can arrive at Rockland in the morning and have a fine day sail to their destination. The Maine, with a central invited guest, Honorable Frank Jones and invited guest, are expected to attend the launching. Mr. Jones, for whom the boat is named, has presented her with a magnificent suite of colors. Shipbuilding is very quiet in Bath just now. The New England Company have a four-masted bark of 1,400 tons under construction for William Bessie of New Bedford, and a little steamer of 105-foot keel and 17-foot beam for George Stover of New York. And the Sewells resume work on their big ship as soon as a cargo of pine arrives. I wonder where that pine would come from. You'd think they're using pine, it would just be local in Maine. We still have that tickle. Spring tickle, we still have the little. At a meeting, we're going to a news story here. But that's neat about the side wheeler. At a meeting of the directors of the Aroostook Condensed Milk Company at Newport on Saturday, it was voted to build no more factories until those at Newport and Winthrop have been completed. Condensed milk. This action is taken to demonstrate the success of the factories before making any further extension. Later, the company will erect 3 more factories in the best dairy districts to be found in Maine, 2 of which are determined on account of fertility of the land and railroad facilities. Condensed milk. It's in a can. Let's look at the Skowhegan Cheater. He left his wife and child. Skowhegan's scandals don't come singly this year. This is 1892. Another sensational Skowhegan disappearance. The businessman flees with a dressmaker. It's a good headline, isn't it? A second scandal and sensation for Skowhegan. This time, it is a young and well-known businessman who, according to his own story, has got himself into a scrape. On Monday, Fred Howes, after closing out his business and leaving town ostensibly for the purpose of going into business in a city on the Kennebec, is charged with desertion of his wife and child and flying with a young dressmaker. Ooh, the scandal here. February 14th, the firm of Thompson and Howe sold out and began to settle up their outstanding bills. Well, at least they did that. On Monday of last week, House took the 1:45 p.m. train for Gardner. Who doesn't want to take that train? He told his wife that he would come back Saturday night and would write her. I'm going to write you. Sure he would. That night, a young dressmaker, well known here, left town by team going to Waterville, and though there all trace of her is lost. The husband has started the rumor that the wife had been untrue to him and that was the cause of his indiscreet acts with the dressmaker and finally of him leaving home. He did not return Saturday, and the first intimation that the wife had of anything wrong was when on Friday, House's brother brought a letter to the wife addressed to himself and mailed in Buffalo. House sold his house here. He pocketed the proceeds, which he took with him, leaving his wife and child almost penniless. The Skowhegan Cheater running off with the dressmaker in 1892. Let's see, anxiety in Brunswick. 3 vessels whose captains belong in that town. The 3 vessels are overdue. Some of the Brunswick sea captains are overdue on their voyages, and it's causing considerable anxiety among their friends. Captain J. Bell Hall in the Samuel Schofield is 166 days out of New York to Bombay, a trip that ought not to take much more than 100 days. Captain John Bishop in the George R. Schofield is 119 days out from New York to Calcutta, and Captain Alfred Dunning in the George Schofield has been 227 days on the passage from New York to Yokohama, Japan. News from any of these ships would be welcome just now. 1892, they were looking for these boats that are long overdue. And then we looked into it a little bit. The George R. Schofield, and that was the one that was going from New York to Calcutta. It was the biggest, most famous, and possibly the most forlorn sailing ship ever. It ran aground in 1920 off of New Jersey. There's a sad end to it. And there's some pictures here. You can find this ship on the web and a little bit of the story. Let's see, on February 5th, 1920, so obviously it made it back from Calcutta, but here's the backstory. In 1920, it ran aground in New Jersey, and she wasn't salvaged. She was left to decay in the sand. She remained buried for half a century, and then finally in the 1970s, what remained of the George R. was finally resurrected and carried away. In the story of the George R. Schofield, the first George Schofield was born in July 1780 in Brunswick, Maine, At the age of 21, he decided that he didn't particularly care for the life of a farmer and he wanted to be a shipbuilder. So with no capital whatsoever, he borrowed money for a broadaxe. He set up shop in Brunswick and proceeded to establish himself in the business. He became known as Master George Schofield. And it's noted here, he must have been one fine businessman. During his time, the Schofield Yard built more than 60 ships, square riggers, schooners, and sloops at a rate of about one a year. And when he died in 1866, Master George had become one of the wealthiest men in Brunswick. Along the way, he sired 8 children, including George Rogers Schofield in 1809. George R., along with his 2 brothers, took over the operation of the shipbuilding business on their father's death. So as noted, they built wooden ships, and they not only built them, but they owned them and sometimes captained them as they sailed around the world. The business prospered until iron and steel vessels started to usurp their prominence in the latter part of the 19th century. There's a nice picture here of it, painting depicting the 232-foot George R. Schofield sailing ship during its 19th century heyday. It is a magnificent-looking sailing ship. Perhaps as a last hurrah, the Schofield shipyard launched its largest ever full-rigged ship in 1885, and this is the George R. Schofield. The cost then was $88,000. And apparently in keeping with family tradition, she was named the George R. Schofield, complete with George's own carved likeness as the figurehead. Now, would you want your figurehead on the front of a ship? She was 232 feet long, about the same length as a Boeing 747, weighed in at 1,700 tons. Her first voyage was an around-the-world trip. As the pride of the family's fleet, the George R. regularly carried goods to and from the Orient and visited ports in Australia, Hawaii, and West Indies. But it wasn't to last. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Although it had begun life as a square-rigged sailing ship, she was later converted to a speedier 3-masted schooner. And a schooner was less expensive to operate and was intended to compete with the new metal ships that were being built. By the time she headed out on her final voyage, she had been converted again, this time downgraded to what is called a schooner barge, to be towed sailless up and down the East Coast. They note it's a good thing that the real George R. Schofield wasn't still around to see this proud ship to be reduced to barge status. And the last trip began in Fall River, Mass. in early 1920. It was supposed to end up in Hampton Roads, Virginia, but on February 5th, a violent nor'easter got in the way, and it broke her tow, and heavy seas drifted and was grounded in Sea Isle City. Her 4 crew members were safely brought ashore by a surf boat from the Sea Isle, and after many attempts to refloat the ship, she was finally abandoned, started to break up and sink in the sand, and essentially disappeared. And so there she was stuck in the mud, and then eventually a lady named Susan Langston, 1971, she saw what appeared to be a large chunk of driftwood along the beach in Sea Isle, but it wasn't driftwood. It was a chunk of this George R. Schofield ship newly exposed in the sand. So she dug it out and had the chunk of the ship raised and moved on a flatbed truck to her friend's backyard. The piece weighed about 10 tons. Susan Langston was finally able to identify her find and to arrange for shipment to the Percy and Small Shipyard, which was part of the Maine Maritime Museum, and wanted to have the exhibit close to where George R. had originally launched her. That piece is still in the Maine Maritime Museum. Apparently it's 134 years old. They took the mast from the ship and they used it as a flagpole at the Sea Isle City Historical Museum. Quite the story about a ship and how it started out and ended up. What else do we have on that? That's enough ship talk. Let's go to our wolf story. We'll round this thing out here. This is from the Lewiston Journal in 1892, and they're going back to 1800. In about 1800, Moses Greenleaf was married and settled in that part of Maine not many miles from where Milo is situated. His wife was a frail, delicate woman and seemed unfitted for the hardships those first years the wilderness brought. Their house was a rudely built log cabin having a slanted roof and containing 2 rooms. In place of the usual brick oven, they had one built of stones and clay. One day during the 3rd or 4th year of their life there, Moses Greenleaf was obliged to go to a point some miles distant, and in order to get home before dark, he started very early. As it was Friday, Mrs. Greenleaf thought that during her husband's absence, she'd do the baking for Sunday. In the middle of the afternoon, a snowstorm set in, which gradually increased until she felt some anxiety for fear that her husband would miss his way. It grew later and later, and he did not come. As she was fastening the window shutter, a sound greeted her ear, which fairly made her blood run cold in her veins. It was the long-drawn howl of a wolf. As the sound drew near, she perceived that instead of one, as it was first supposed, there were actually many wolves. The baby and his sister, who was about 3 years old, hearing them, immediately began to cry, which only served to irritate the wolves. Mrs. Greenleaf succeeded in moving a strong chest to the door for a barricade, as she was afraid they'd break through. These are wolves in Maine, 1800, Milo, Maine. Soon a thud was heard on the roof, followed by others. The wolves had climbed to the best place for an attack, the roof being quite thin in some spots, and they could easily tear it up. Mrs. Greenleaf was nearly crazed with fear and despair. The little girl asked, "Where's Papa?" And she dared not answer. Then the girl said, "Mama, they're coming down the chimney." Wolves in the chimney. On glancing around the room, Mrs. Greenleaf's eye chanced to fall on the pies, bread, meat, cookies, etc. that had been cooked that day. Thinking that perhaps the wolves could be enticed from the roof, she threw some of it out with success. But no sooner was it gone than they were as uneasy as before and began to show signs of taking to the roof again, so another supply was thrown out. She was much surprised on looking at the clock to find it nearly midnight, and Mr. Greenleaf had still not come home, and every moment seemed an age. The rest of the night was dragged out in throwing food to the wolves, but not without the most harrowing thought of what their fate might be. Isn't that terrifying, wolves on your roof? Morning was just beginning to dawn when the report of a gun was heard in the clearing. Looking through a chink in the wall, she saw her husband fire a parting shot at those terrible beasts that had fled. And on seeing the slaughter of their companions, they stayed around only long enough to drag their bodies out of range where they could eat them in safety. Eat their companions. When Mr. Greenleaf had come in and heard the adventure of his wife, he told his experience. He had started for home not a great while before the snow began to fall, and upon its increase he became bewildered and lost the trail, wandering around all night. It stopped snowing a very short time before daybreak, and he saw by landmarks that his cabin was near, so arriving at the right time. He had heard no sound the wolves made, as the wind was blowing in the wrong direction. The wolves of the olden times are nearly all killed off, but there are hundreds of women in this country, and with more than 2 children to depend on them, engaged in a great struggle to keep the wolf from the door. I don't know if there's some embellishment going on there, whether that's really true or not. I guess it is. We'll look at the weather forecast and we'll send you on the day. It is Friday. Don't want you to work too hard today listening to the Downeast Mike podcast. Well, for today, sunny with a high, if you can call it that, high near 36. West-northwest wind around 14 miles per hour, gusting as high as 25. We've heard some of those gusts just a few minutes ago. It's certainly right up there. For Friday night, snow mainly after 2 a.m., low around 24. For Saturday, snow and sleet, possibly mixed with freezing rain before noon, then rain and sleet mixed with freezing rain. Winds a little bit lighter, down to 8 miles per hour. they're not given a quantity of snow. And Saturday night, more rain and snow, becoming all snow after midnight. And then Sunday, snow. Next week, sunny and 40s. That's it. That's what we got in Maine this time of year. And that's our podcast for today. I thank you for listening. Until next time, this is Downeast Mike, wishing you and your loved ones a day that's full of grace, love, and kindness. We'll see you.
Thought I'd said goodbye, but in the corner of my eye, brother, father, and mother waiting patiently for me. Pull up the cover, maybe they'll go away. And I remember when the sun was yellow, I remember billowing clouds rising high over the river as I swam and played with you. And I remember water clear and pure, and the woodland trails we ran, roots and stones and pine cones. The pain's not gone, it's in the thunder bucket, in the thunder bucket. Ow! It's in the thunder bucket. The pack of lunch, they say, only there's nothing there. The things that we consume, heartache and despair. Watching the tide go out, only mud remains. I remember when the sun was yellow, and I remember billowing clouds rising high over the river as I swam and played with you. I remember water clear and pure, and the woodland trails we ran, roots and stones and pine cones. The pain's not gone, it's in the thunder bucket. Ow! In the thunder bucket. Yellow, I remember billowing clouds rising high